All right. All right. I hope this thing works. Um. There we go. Wait. Hold on a second. Okay. There we go. I think. Hopefully. All right. There we go. Cool. Cool. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. Oh, how is everyone doing today? Um. This thing usually. Okay. There we go. It's like all the way over there. Let me share this out. See, before I share this out, let me actually get my comics, which I left downstairs. Amazing. I stopped to use the bathroom, and then I forget to do the thing that I went downstairs to do in the first place. Smart move. Smart move. Okay, now I'm back. For real this time. I promise. I promise. I promise. I promise. Okay, so, what's up, 1610 man? How you doing? I feel like you're gonna have to change that name though after the next couple months. Um, because I feel like Hickman is changing the Ultimate Universe moniker in a big bad way. Uh, Weekly News says Martin Scorsese screams about superhero genre again, and water confirmed to be wet. Yeah, that's like the funny thing is that I agree with Martin Scorsese, but I don't like the place it's coming from. Like, you know how you agree with someone, but you think the impetus behind what you're agreeing with is something that you inherently disagree with. Um, I feel like he just kind of has like a boomer take on superhero movies. Um, he's he's not. I don't think he's looking at them with a sense of sincerity. Um, I think he's just frustrated that the superhero blockbuster film has become the thing that keeps the Hollywood movie making machine going. Despite the fact that I generally think the Hollywood machine died decades ago. Um like seriously, I think home video killed the movie the industry. It killed the movie industry as it was uh like created to be. Um and that's how you got the blockbuster in the first place. Like having the big spectacle that everyone goes to the theater to watch, and then like home video kind of, I don't know. I feel like what we're seeing now is just an extension of what Jaws was like 50 years ago. You know, um, but if Marty's mad, Marty can just be mad. Um, I don't think superheroes inherently are devoid of human emotion. I think these big mythic, or I said mythic, funny. I think these big mythic tales um, are ripe for silver screen adaptation. Um, do I think that uh, most of them are lacking in uh, like a core human like pathos? So I think a lot of them are just kind of romps that are forgettable, yeah, but I don't think they have to be, and I think just looking at them like that is a disservice to like the genre. And it also just comes off as like sour grapes. I'm sorry, more people want to go watch like Brain Dead, superhero schlock. You know, they fly now. Well, that's Star Wars, but like, you know, they want to watch like On Your Left. They want to watch that more than they want to watch like The Irishman. Okay, sorry, Marty. That's what people want to watch. But you're not just competing with superhero movies, you're also competing with the fact that The Sopranos is legitimately like one of the greatest crime shows of all time. And it's it's on a home viewing platform. You're competing with Boardwalk Empire, you're competing with The Wire. Like a lot of the films that Martin Scorsese is like talking about that he wishes he could see. And just here's the thing with film in general. A lot of the stuff that people are saying, like, why don't we make movies like this anymore? Superheroes ruined that. That dude who's he's like a comedian. He's like one of the guys from Workaholics. He was like, Marvel destroyed the comedy film. Marvel didn't destroy the comedy film. The like 5 or 6 years of really crappy comedy films coupled with comedy television being really, really good killed the comedy film. Like that. You can be mad that these things aren't being made, but look at the actual reason why they're not being made or why they're not big anymore. A lot of gangster films have to compete with a lot of really good gangster TV shows. A lot of horror films have to compete with a lot of really good horror TV shows. A lot of really good, big, out there, action thrillers have to compete with television. 24 changed the game in a big way. You don't have to go watch, like, Die Hard on the big screen. You can kind of watch Die Hard. You can watch like Jack Bauer do Die Hard for like an hour 22 times per season, or like, I don't know, was that like a 15 episode season type show or something like that? But still, regardless, like there were other reasons beyond superhero films like hogging the spotlight for superhero films existing and the films that you like not existing anymore. Just, I don't know. It's dumb. I'm all down for blaming Marvel for ruining the culture. Sure, because the Disney machine is the Disney machine, and as it's being practiced, but let's be real here. Let's be real here. But if Marty wants to vent, he can vent. He's earned the right to vent, I suppose. Not even I suppose. Like he definitely has. It's just I'm really resisting the urge to not just say like whatever, boomer. Just honestly, Martin Scorsese seems like he hates superheroes and comics in general, but yet he doesn't complain about action movies. Yeah, and that's what superhero movies are. They're action movies plus spandex, or I guess in this case it's not really spandex. It's like military gear because the Mark Miller and Brian Hitch's Ultimates ruined superheroes, but you know, still, that's what it is. What's up, John Ty? How you doing, buddy? Remember the late 2000s when the writer's strike happened because actors and writers were afraid of the home video media? Yeah, and that gave rise to, that was part of the reason that super movies got really big. Because Christopher Nolan and Kevin Feige and all those guys, they changed the game in a big bad way. Everybody complaining about superheroes, like everybody complaining about George Lucas' Star Wars back in the 70s and 80s. That's funny. I mean, I totally see what they're talking about in the '80s because there were a lot of crappy Star Wars clones in the '70s and '80s. But Star Wars also kind of gave way for some of the stuff that George Lucas wanted to do coming back. Like, I think Star Trek got really big in the '80s again. You also saw the Flash Gordon movie in the '80s, which I don't think you would have seen if it wasn't for Star Wars. So I don't know. I think Alien's also a big one. The Alien franchise. Yeah, I don't think you get those without Star Wars. I don't think you get Terminator without Star Wars. So again, I see what I see the point. But like in the same way that like the MCU is big, the MCU also gave birth to, on top of a lot of like crappy clone attempts, we also got some legitimately good stuff out of the superhero onslaught. We like legitimately did. So I don't know. John Ty says, I mean, the Oppenheimer movie has $900 million at the box office, so there is an audience for stuff like that. It's just that isn't just superhero movies. That's true. Yeah, that's just true. I, it's just he's just old and mad. I don't know. I'm trying to just boil it down to that. I don't want to reduce him to that, but that's how it seems to me. Workaholics guy should have complained about Will Ferrell ruining comedy movies. New Zealand deadpan snarker, television comedy streaming services. Yeah. Again, there's a lot of things that went into this. What's up, Supreme? To be fair with Scorsese, there should be more auteur-driven superhero movies, and that's the thing that I agree with. And this is the thing that I think is like the biggest wins / failing of the MCU. Once you kind of homogenize everything into like a set house style, you do lose a lot of that like uniqueness that I think a lot of superhero movies of the 70s, 80s, 90s, and the early 2000s definitely had. Because now everything kind of has to fit a mold. And that's like the big like drawback with shared universes. It's why I ultimately don't really want the DC universe to be something that is part of that homogenized like factory setting, kind of like work machine. That machine. I don't want the DC universe to be that machine. Where everything just kind of becomes the same. And even when they're not being the same, they feel like they're just kind of doing the same thing. But, I mean, you look at what Marvel's doing with the Hulk right now, and you look at, like, Ang Lee's Hulk, there's a big difference. Also, Ang Lee's Hulk, it feels more in line with the comics. Ironically, for all the changes that it makes, it feels like it's still getting the heart and soul of what the Hulk is ultimately. At the very least, it's getting the heart and soul of what Peter David's Hulk was. Look back at the Nolan Batman films. That's like an auteur film trilogy. And, I mean, it's not comic book Batman, but it's still... It has the flavor of Batman. And ultimately, that's why we go to these movies anyways. I think that's why we go to these movies anyways. I like seeing different takes on these characters. That's the whole point of really liking like Elseworlds type stories. Um, that's the whole reason behind liking original graphic novels. I feel like superhero films should be like ranked in the same category as like OGNs and stuff like that. Um, because when you're watching a film, you're basically watching someone say, I want to do this really cool thing using this character and saying this, but over here, so I'm not disturbing what's here, I'm doing it over there. And you can either like or dislike what's happening over here, but this is me. This is how I'm expressing myself through this character. This is my message, and I'm using this character to illustrate that or say these things. And I just feel like you don't do that anymore. Or at the very least, I don't think we see that anymore. And that's a big problem with like the Hollywood, the well-oiled machine. But I also think that's a problem with superheroes in general. Not like even beyond films. Like you see that in comics, you see that in video games. I don't think people are interested in like using these characters to illustrate points anymore. And that's a whole bit in and of itself. But I don't know. I think Martin Scorsese's onto something with all of his complaints, but I also think the place he's coming from with his ire is misguided and disingenuous. So I don't know. That's all I got to say on that. Sixington says, mystical green beanie quote, Mark Miller and Brian Hitch unintentionally ruined superhero costumes. They did. They did though. I mean, like I love the Ultimates, but I feel like the big problem with the Ultimates is that it got really popular and a lot of people learned the wrong lessons from the Ultimates. It's how you wind up with the Avengers movie, which is more or less just the first Ultimates, but with all of the political commentary about the military-industrial complex and like not just American imperialism, but like Western imperialism at large. Just all that is just taken out of the it's just taken out of the story, and you just have the American superheroes by way of the massive overfunded government organization that's completely shady. They bring together these heroes, and it's actually a good thing. Superhero industrial complex good. That's what the Avengers movie is. It's like a tone-deaf version of Mark Miller and Brian Hitch's Ultimates. And that just kind of informed the culture for the next decade. It's frustrating, but if I just turn off the critical thinking parts of my brain, it's just funny. Or if I just turn off the frustration, then it's funny. Supreme Omega says, to be honest, in terms of comics, a comic fan would be more understandable of superhero fatigue, especially if you want to get a job as an artist or a writer. It always has to be superheroes. That's an interesting point, because I am a comic book writer. I do write lots of different things. I feel the opposite. I feel like the comic book market, and this is a good thing. This is legitimately a good thing. Because this shows that the industry is healing from the effects of the Comics Code Authority, which comics are still dealing with like 70 years later. But I feel like if you're trying to do like a horror story, well, how many horror stories are there out there? Like, how many people like read The Walking Dead and said, I'm gonna do my version of The Walking Dead? Or how many people looked at like action comedies and said, oh, I'm gonna do my action comedy? Like things that aren't superheroes kind of feel at least from my perspective, it feels like it's like daunting. It feels like I'm one of like 800 million goldfish in like a tiny little aquarium tank. Like we're all kind of like stuffed in this one 8-gallon tank, and it's 800 million of us. But I don't know. That's just my perspective of someone who's like in comics now. John Ty says, for me, when it comes to superhero movies, I'm kind of tired of the superhero film formula where it's just make it a comedy action movie. I'm in that same boat too. That's why, ironically, I feel like someone like Zack Snyder was ahead of the curve. Because he wasn't making those movies at the time when making those movies was the thing to do. But now going back to them in the landscape that we're in, where that's all we've really been getting, because that's been the money making mold that Marvel built their entire empire off of. God damn, is watching Man of Steel just a breath of fresh air. Like, oh man, like when Zack Snyder's Justice League came out, I think like the year after Infinity War, and in like Avengers Endgame, and that was like that whole time period where we're getting like Spider-Man Far From Home, and Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel came out earlier, but like a bunch of those type of movies, and like Thor, like Love and Thunder and all that. Man, isn't it just nice to have like big epic superhero action that's not oh, we were using our fake names? Hi, it was just nice to have superheroes be epic and cool and unironically stand as the wind blows against their capes and they billow in the wind and they look at the sunset. It was refreshing. I don't know. Zack Snyder was ahead of his time. Your boy Zack was ahead of his time. He really was. But I don't know, man. I am tired of the action comedy formula, and I really hope that whatever James Gunn is planning on doing with the DC universe in the next like 2 years, I hope he breaks away from it, and I hope whatever Kevin Feige's got planned, I hope he is willing to let more creators kind of deviate from the path that built his career. I mean, he's done it with he let Chloe Zhao make Eternals, and it's unfortunate that that movie didn't perform, because I think that was like one of the most interesting superhero films to come out the past decade. You know? But then everyone said, oh my god, it's dumb, because there's no central villain. We say we want interesting and different things, but then something interesting and different comes along, and then everyone just kind of rejects it. It's... frustrating is a word I'll use. I'll just say it's frustrating. 1610 Man says, Sony 2014 leaked emails, Josh Trank's Venom pitch, the mask with symbiotes. I mean, that's basically what the Venom movie is. 1610 Man, comic book mainstream universe accuracy versus auteur driven alternate reality multiverse dawn of endless debates. Yeah, and then one of the things that I often ran into at my comic shop, and still do sometimes, is there are the people who clearly don't read comics, but they watch like Comic Explained and they watch Comic Story and Comic Pop, so they have like a rough idea of who these characters are, and they're like, well, I don't read comics, but I watch these things, or I watch these Storytime channels, so I know comics. Which, like, it's fine, you know, if you watch them, if you watch those guys, it's fine. That's really cool. I like comics. Here's the thing, I wouldn't be doing it. I wouldn't be able to do this if it wasn't for, like, you know, Comics Explained, Comic Historian, Comic Pop. It's super effective. Comic Book Cast 19, God bless them. Those hilariously parodic bastards. But, you know, I wouldn't be able to do any of this without them. But I do feel like there is a contingent of comic book fans that don't actually read these books, and they just kind of go like, well, I read the synopsis. It's like when you were in high school, and like you have to read a book for like a report, and you don't feel like doing all that shit, so you get the what was that thing called? Cliff Notes. You get the Cliff Notes version of it. There were a lot of comic book fans like that that I've interacted with at my old comic book shop, and I think they're the ones who are like, comic accuracy matters, blah blah blah. Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man, he's the most comic accurate version of the character, even though he's not. But, like, you know, blah 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 blah. So when a film is like very staunchly saying, no, I am going my way with this character, I'm looking at the comics and I'm taking that framework and I'm taking the frame apart, I'm going to cut it into like weird pieces, I'm going to paint it different colors, and I'm going to put it back together in a different assortment, and I'm going to make my own frame using these characters. I feel like a lot of those guys can't handle that. Or there's just the people who do read comics, but they're just so anal. They're like, no, Batman has to be this exactly. Even though Batman's like a very sorted character who's wildly inconsistent, but okay, whatever. He has to be a certain kind of way. No, he has to be like he is in the animated series, even though the animated series Batman in and of itself is a take on Batman. It's not comic book Batman, it's a take on Batman, but okay. It's the iconic take, I guess. 2010s, even every Marvel and DC comic wanted to be indie comics. That's true. That was the big mark of the 2010s. I just did that whole video about how I feel like comics are getting better, like Western superhero comics are getting better. But I feel like that's like one of the big reasons why they were kind of suffering for a long time. I feel like you had superhero comics that didn't want to be superhero comics or weren't interested in being superhero comics. And in some cases that worked. You know, sometimes you'll get a Jonathan Hickman working on the Avengers, where that's not really an Avengers book. It's like it's Warhammer, but with it's Warhammer with Marvel characters. That's what the Hickman Avengers book was. It's not an Avengers comic. It's not a superhero comic, but it is. It's Warhammer with Marvel characters in it. That's what that is. Or you'll get Matt Fraction and David Ayer's Hawkeye, which is, as I think, well, what you guys pointed out, it's just the Professional. It's the Professional with Marvel characters in it. So you have stuff like that works. But then you have stuff that doesn't work. And you're just like, oh, what are you doing? What are you doing? And you still get that sometimes. Like the current Fire and Ice comic is definitely that. It's one of those superheroes. So anyways, who likes Two Broke Girls? Imagine Two Broke Girls but with fire and ice. No. How about no? Nah, bro, we ain't doing that. I feel like that was just that was a lot of comics. From the I'll say the late 2000s into like the early 2020s. It was that whole decade long stint was like that. I mean, granted, there's a lot of good stuff that came out of it, but there's a lot of bad stuff that came out of it too. MCU equals Jon Favreau style clones and DCEU Nolan style clones. Yeah. No, you're you're absolutely right there. No commentary required. You're just right. Supreme Omega, on the criticisms with the recent MCU stuff, it has developed the same problem that ongoing Big Two comics, and that long-term ongoing continuity can become a creative block, which is funny because I don't think it has to. I think one of the cool things about superheroes and superhero comics is that you're playing a telephone game, and even if you're saddled with something that you don't like or a status quo that you don't like, I personally think that that's an opportunity to dissect what you're not currently into and build something out of that, or sometimes make the thing that you don't like the story. Like prime example, Philip Kennedy Johnson is currently doing a really good job with Action Comics. I didn't pick it up this week because I'm getting that book in trade, but he's doing a really good job with Action Comics, and the opening of that run really suggests that he does not like John Kent being aged up. And some of the stuff that he does with Lex Luthor, erasing Clark Kent's identity from the world, suggests that he did not like what Bendis did when Superman came out of the closet. So he took those ideas and made them interesting. Even though you get the sense he didn't like those status quos, it gave him an opportunity to, make that story. That whole first that 3 or 4 issue arc where Clark is going to that alien planet with John, and they have to I think they have to kill an alien parasite or something. But that whole thing is about how Clark is lamenting the fact that he didn't get to watch his son grow up, and there's now a disconnect between Clark and John. That is taking a status quo that you don't like, or generally is seen as being unfavorable, and making it work. Grant Morrison's whole run is defined by, there's a lot of stuff that's going on in this ongoing DC continuity with Batman. A lot of it I like, some of it I don't like, but I'm gonna take the entire history of this character, and that's gonna be the story. And I'm gonna do a whole story about this man who is coming out of a midlife crisis, but is still suffering the consequences of his actions amidst his midlife crisis. I think that's what you do when you're working in an ongoing setting. The universe becomes the story, and the characters are kind of I don't say mouthpieces for commenting on the universe, or I don't know, but you can use the ongoing format to its advantage in that way. And the fact that I don't think it's being properly done is frustrating. It's just frustrating because I've seen it done well, and with this, you're just not doing it well. If Star Wars can do it, you can do it. Granted, Star Wars is kind of a different thing. I guess a more appropriate one is Star Trek, but even then, Star Trek kind of devolves until J.J. Abrams reboots it in 2009. Actually, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know, man. I think it only really works in comics. now that I've talked myself in circles, I think it only really works in comics. John Ty says, that's a lot of entertainment in general, where a story becomes very popular, and that popularity makes it a trend to copy, but the copycats fail to understand why it was popular. Yeah, that's a lot of stuff. That is a lot of stuff. Um, are you like referencing when I was talking about the Ultimates? Because yeah. I still stand by the fact that the Ultimates broke comics, despite the fact that it's the best superhero comic that Marvel's ever published. Supreme Omega says, on the problem with ongoing continuity, it makes me ask, what more can you do with Batman? We broke his back, we destroyed his city several times, we divided the Bat family multiple times, same old, same old, same old. So I think there's tons of stuff to do with Batman. The obvious problem you're going to run into is that some of these characters are just too big for their own good. DC is not going to let Bruce Wayne die. Despite the fact that I think having having Bruce Wayne die at the hands of Darkseid in Final Crisis, while using the God gun, I'm gonna call it. He uses the gun that is the blueprint for all guns. The thing that creates Batman in the first place, a gun. Bruce Wayne, his whole thing is, I hate guns, guns are evil, guns, they ruin my life. Having Bruce Wayne use a gun to shoot Darkseid, primordial essence of evil and all the universe and the hearts of man, blah blah blah. Batman shooting evil with a gun, and then dying as he slays this dark god. That is the perfect ending for Bruce Wayne as a character. And the fact that DC didn't stick with it is a mistake. But that should have been the end of Batman. No, not the end of Batman. That should have been the end of Bruce Wayne. Dick Grayson going on to become Batman should have been the ongoing status quo, and it should be the status quo now. But it's not. Because Bruce Wayne's too popular to have DC do away with. And that's the ultimate problem with a lot of these ongoing characters. The problem isn't the fact that, you can't do anything with them. The problem is Marvel and DC won't let you actually go anywhere interesting and stay in an interesting place. Because what's interesting in a lot of ways, or 9 out of 10 times, is not commercial. Or commercial in the sense that, like, you can't kill off the big mascots. And that's the ultimate problem. You always have to go back to the status quo. It's the reason why Peter Parker and MJ, well, even foregoing MJ, it's the reason why Peter Parker as a character can never put Spider-Man down. Because that's the ultimate end game with that character. Spider-Man is Peter Parker feeling the same level of guilt as a grown man that he felt as a child when he first became Spider-Man. J. Michael Straczynski's whole run, this isn't me saying this. This was I think this was Steve Baxi from Geeky Gentleman. He made a really interesting point in their analysis of Since Past. That the Straczynski run at the end of the day is Peter Parker is so emotionally stunted by all the trauma he experienced from his childhood up, and he doesn't even realize that he's emotionally stunted through all that trauma, and he never got help for it. He never got therapy, he could ever afford therapy for that matter. But these are problems that just kind of weren't resolved, and that's why he's still Spider-Man. he's forever going to be the ultimate man child in that sense. But Peter Parker finally coming to like a like the ultimate conclusion is realizing that he's made up for Uncle Ben's death a million times over, and that Spider-Man was the tool to help him grow into the man that he needed to be. And from there, putting Spider-Man as an institution in his life to rest is that's where it ends. Ideally, it should have ended after Clone Saga. Like, Peter Parker's story ends after Clone Saga. Like that final issue where he's hugging MJ and they're looking at the Queensboro Bridge after she's like just suffered a miscarriage. That's like the perfect. That was like the perfect place to just put Spider-Man to rest. And then you had it again with Spider-Man 500, where Peter tells Uncle Ben that, or Doctor Strange gives Peter the gift of talking to Uncle Ben post-mortem. That's a good ending to Spider-Man. Like, that brings everything kind of full circle. So I don't know. I feel like Spider-Man's story. I feel like Peter Parker's story ended a while ago. That's the thing. I think comics are so bound to the status quo, or superhero comics are so bound to the status quo that you can't let a lot of these like corporate mascots go, even if their stories are like already kind of over. Like Wally West, his story's kind of over. Like, I mean, I say that as someone who genuinely enjoyed the last run on the character by Joshua Williamson, and I love the first issue of the Cy Spurrier run with Mike Deodato Jr., but that said, Wally's story is over. Wally's story ended after the Jeff Johns run, if we're being honest. Like, Wally West doesn't have to be the Flash anymore. Ideally, that role should have gone to Jesse Quick. Ideally. And then from Jesse Quick, it should have gone to Bart. But DC didn't go that direction. They put Bart in that costume. And that whole run was just 12 issues of... That was just a big ol'... Isn't Ultimate Spider-Man popular right now? Let's just try to copy that and not do it as well. And because it was so poorly received, DC just kind of backtracked and said, let's bring Wally West back. Aren't you happy we're going to bring Wally West back? And then you got Mark Waid to do a... It's fine. But it's like completely forgettable. Like that fine but completely forgettable run on Wally West. And it's not great. And then they brought Barry Allen back, which after like a over a decade now, wow, what a nothing burger that turned out to be. But yeah, I don't know. Sometimes you should just let characters go. But that's never gonna happen with the big characters. But let me see. 1610 says fans having problems with mainstream universe's ongoing continuities during the present alienating era equals just tell stories during your favorite era in the timeline, which leads to its own problems. That's how I feel like that's when you start putting a lot of positive forward momentum in like a state of stasis. That's when those characters feel like they're not actually growing anymore. They're just kind of there. That's when it feels like IP management. 1610 says Bruce Wayne that died in Final Crisis. It was a clone connected to the original. Yeah, I'm hip. But it should have been Bruce Wayne's death. instead of it being like the Omega effect. I don't know. I mean, I know that's what the that's what it does, because that's like what it originally did in like the Jack Kirby Forever, the Forever People run. Apparently, that's what Grant Morrison's that's like the whole thing Grant Morrison is like bringing back. But he should have died. Bruce Wayne should have died. That would have been a cool death for Bruce Wayne, but it wasn't, because he got brought back, and it's dumb. Tevi says, question: what about letting Peter Parker retire? He should. That's, you know, I went that whole spiel, but yeah, he should retire. He should have retired a long time ago, but as he is now, holy crap! Just kill him. Kill him in like the worst, most irreverent way possible now. Just out of spite. Just Marvel, just to spite me. Have like open the new Amazing Spider-Man run with like Peter Parker swinging through Manhattan, and then Kane the Conqueror just shows up and he vaporizes Spider-Man, and that's it. And then you gotta find a new Spider-Man. That at this point, just do that. Just do that. The character's over. You broke it. Marvel, you kind of broke Spider-Man. It's over. Supreme Omega says, on the trend of comic creators recreating their childhood nostalgia, when did this trend start? I know it didn't start in the 2000s with Johnson DiDio. Was it the 90s? Was it the 80s? It was the 90s. The 90s was when you saw the first generation to really grow up with superhero comics as like a cultural mainstay, actually getting into comics. Before, in like the 50s, like the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, those were generations who grew up in superhero comics where superheroes weren't really like it's not a point of pride. It was not a point of pride to say I work in comics. But the 90s was when you had a whole generation who was like, that's when you get like Rob Liefeld. That's when you get the British invasion, like the younger British invasion guys like Grant Morrison and Mark Miller and Brian Hitch. I'm not sure if I said Warren Ellis already, but I think like Warren Ellis, Neil Gaiman. This is when like Mark Waid gets in the comics. This is when Brian K. Vaughan gets in the comics. This is when that whole generation that grew up on superhero comics in like the 60s and 70s and like the 80s, and we're like, yeah, no, I love comics, like that, like the generation of the nerds who were like, yeah, I love comics growing up as a kid, like the Jim Lees. The 90s is that era when they get into the industry, and that's when you start seeing the return to form. That's when Jim Lee redesigns like the X-Men characters in that book, and they more or less just kind of go back to what they look like in the late 70s, when Jim Lee was probably like 7 or 8 reading comic books. That's when you have a lot of those comics artists and writers coming onto Spider-Man, going like, why is Peter Parker an adult now? This is stupid. Peter Parker wasn't an adult when I was like 9 in like 1974. Peter Parker shouldn't be an adult. He should be like 20 and having girl problems. You know, that's how I like my ideal Spider-Man. So that's when you start seeing that nostalgia take hold. So it was definitely the 90s when that happened. 2020 writer strike equals overreacting about AI. It's not really an overreaction. I really don't think it's an overreaction. Now I personally don't think AI is okay. On a creative side, I don't think AI is gonna be that big of a problem in the next, like, at least for the next, like, 15-20 years, until AI, like, really kind of becomes a fully fleshed out entity where, you know, it transcends even, like, human understanding, as, like, in a broad sense, where it can, like, fully mimic the human experience, and also mimic data output in a subjective sense. I think that's when AI is gonna become, like, a threat to, like, the artistic process. But by that point, I don't think the artistic process is gonna be the thing to worry about. But corporations, like, hey, ChatGPT can crap this out in, like, 5 minutes. Let's just do that. I think that was the big worry. That logic is stupid. I don't know. Maybe it is, but I don't know. Are you talking about what I was saying? Maybe. I don't know. I say a lot of stupid stuff. 1610 Man says, Marvel, you want the retirement of Peter Parker? Go read the MC2 universe. Oh, you mean that universe that they got rid of almost immediately? Yeah, I think that would be cool, but they axed it. No! Okay, there we go. Toby says, personally, for me, I want to have the Peter Parker to have his wife Mary Jane, and they have their daughter Mayday. I do too. Or at least, like, I just want to see Peter Parker grow up and hit that next life milestone. Like, seriously, everything from, like, the 60s to the 90s you're watching. Well, 60s to the 2000s, I'll say. I'll be generous into the 2000s. Even though I don't like the regression and then later progression from there, it does feel like a patchwork job, but that is something that legitimately happens in life to some people. But, you know, the 60s is Peter in high school and then going into college. The 70s is Peter Parker in college and then graduating college. The 80s is Peter working as a teaching assistant and then later in, like, entering his, like, graduate program. And then he's also, like, struggling trying to, like, maintain a job with the Daily Bugle, and he's also trying to, like, deal with gang war and stuff like that. In the 80s is also when he gets married. And then you get the 90s, and that is largely centered around Peter and MJ being newlyweds, and how being a young married couple is difficult, especially given their financial situation and given Peter's like, hobby, I'll say. It's not an occupation. He doesn't get paid for it. It's just a hobby that he does. But, you know, given all that, how that puts a strain on their marriage, and then the end of the 90s is when they break up, and then the 2000s is watching this man who is very clearly and distinctly in his 30s. I don't care who anyone wants to slice it. I don't care how Marvel wants to slice it. But, like, that whole thing is about Peter Parker at age 30. What have I been doing with my life? That is that era of Peter Parker. Kind of struggling to pick up the pieces after his marriage has fallen apart, after his life fell apart after the Clone Saga. After everything, the 2000s, watching a man in his 30s trying to put the pieces of what he had in his 20s back together, and then he gets back with his wife, and he finally tells Aunt May like what's going on. Like that's another life goal, not life goal, but that's like another milestone. That's another milestone. That's passed, and I feel like Peter's just been stuck in this place after One More Day, where like he's not really hitting any milestones. And that's the big problem with Spider-Man post One More Day, and that's the big problem with I mean, it's just a big problem with Spider-Man, dude. This is a character who's all about growth, and he's not growing. Marvel just puts him in like weird situations. They put him in situationships. They put him in these quirky predicaments, but he's not actually growing as a character anymore. He's just kind of there now. That's why I feel like the character just kind of doesn't work right now. I feel like Marvel just kind of shat the bed with Spider-Man completely. But you know, that's why I'm also looking forward to the Jonathan Hickman and Marco Checchetto run on Ultimate Spider-Man. I think that's going to be really good. Hopefully it's really good. I don't think it's going to be Peter Parker. Especially based off of... did I get it this week? No, I didn't get it because it was like $10. But based off of Ultimate Invasion number 4... yeah, Spider-Man is not... I don't think Spider-Man is going to be Peter Parker in this new Ultimate Universe. I feel like sort of the point of Ultimate Invasion is that Reed is trying to put the Ultimate Universe back, but like in a way where it's convenient for him. So he's trying to get rid of some things but keep other things, and have this like idealized version of what the Ultimate Universe once was, but it's just not working. So you're naturally gonna get like a different product. I feel like that is going to lead to a completely new and different Spider-Man. I don't think the Spider-Man that we see in the Hickman run is going to be Peter Parker. I really don't. If it is, I'll be surprised, and I'm still going to read it. I'm fascinated to see what a Hickman Spider-Man book looks like. But I don't think it's going to be Peter Parker as Spider-Man. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's gonna be. I don't think it's gonna be. But we'll see. We'll see. Also, Marvel, you want to read another retirement of Peter Parker? Go read the original Ultimate Universe 1610 version of Ultimate Spider-Man. Yeah, that's another solid ending for that character. He just dies way too young. It's the ultra dark timeline, but it is a valid and interesting one. Question: what about Wally West? The Flash is married and he has a family. He does, but Wally's story already ended. Although I will say I do kind of like what Cy Spurrier and Mike Deodato Jr. are doing with Wally West here. I think it's really interesting how Linda is in a place where she feels unfulfilled, and she feels like Wally's not listening to her, and Wally is also like kind of caught up in his own world. That's another thing I like about this book. As much as I love the Jeremy Adams run, I do feel like it leaned a little. It just leaned in a direction where it was just very safe, which I think the Flash book needed at the time, because up until that point, there was like just a decade or like a decade and a half worth of Flash stories that just. Oof. Wally West fans had it hard. I'll say that. But out of that, I feel like this kind of puts the teeth back on the Flash in a way that we hadn't necessarily seen since the Johns run. Wally is a bit short. He sometimes does not listen to Linda because he's running at such a fast pace. You also have the twins who are like just kind of obnoxious, and Wally and Linda react to them like parents of obnoxious children would react to their children. They get very frustrated. Wally also just kind of, he's not a dick, but he's just kind of. It's that Peter Parker style everyman thing that I was talking about last week. He has a chip on his shoulder, and he has a bit of a temper. He's a grown man about it, and he's trying to not be all like flying off the handle and freaking out, but this book just kind of feels authentic in a way that like I don't think the Flash has been authentic in a long time. And I was really into it. Still, I maintain the fact that the Wally West story already ended. And this is really good, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Don't you mean Bart Allen? Yeah. Oh, I probably said Barry. Which, Bart is named after Barry, so whatever. Yeah, I'm still right. I'm still right. But yeah, I did mean Bart. I almost said it there. But Ben Reilly equals failed legacy character. He was. Yep. What about Miles Morales? He could be the mainstream Spider-Man for this new generation. He could. Marvel just needs to find a voice for that character, because outside of that Spider-Verse movie, Miles is a nothing character. That is the one big thing that I think holds Miles back in the comics from being Peter Parker's replacement. It's just Miles is kind of a nothing burger. You ever like eat something and you just feel like you didn't eat anything? Miles, okay, the best way I can put it is comic book Miles Morales feels like those like styrofoam cup ramen noodles. Like, you ever eat them and you're just like, I'm still hungry. That's what comic book Miles Morales is. He's like a cup of like instant ramen. It's flavorful for like the 2 minutes, but you forget you ate them after a while. That character needs a lot of rehab before he can be even considered to be a solid replacement for Peter Parker in the main universe, that is. Bart Allen, another forgotten legacy character. Oh yeah, well, I think people forgot that he was ever the Flash, that's for sure. Question, what about having Miles Morales? Did I already read this one? Oh, unless you already... I think you just asked this question twice. 1610 says, Spider-Man fans say Spider-Man is broken until another nostalgia-baiting fan service writer comes on and fans complain and consume it anyways. Well, that's kind of the frustrating part about Nick Spencer's run. I feel like Nick Spencer's run was taking things from the past, but using them to illustrate how Spider-Man is a character who has been sort of at this standstill for a long time. There's an arc in the Spencer run where Peter's just on stage. I think it's just an issue where Peter's on stage talking about how he feels like he's a hamster, or he's like stuck on a spinning wheel, and now he hasn't actually progressed or done anything. I thought that was I feel like that's like the big thing behind Spencer's run, but he could not stick the landing because just Marvel editorial told him you can't do that. How do you feel about Ultimate Invasion? Because I read the finale and holy shit, that was disappointing. Really? I thought it was interesting. It's funny, the way you feel is how I felt after reading issue 3, but now after having read issue 4, I'm excited to see what Hickman does next. I mean, the whole thing with Tony Stark I thought was really interesting, and what that can potentially lead into. I don't know, man. I liked it. Hickman almost lost me, but I think issue 4 stuck the landing. I mean, I'd have to read it again, but that'll be like next week when I have the money to buy that $9 comic. Sorry about that. 16 Man says both Marvel and DC live by this trope. The late great Stan Lee referred to them as the illusion of change, which is funny that Stan Lee would say that because a lot of Marvel characters under his editorial reign did progress. I mean, they didn't progress in the same way that like British characters progress. Like a lot of the British characters, like John Constantine from 1986 to like 2011 or 12 or whenever the end of the Hellblazer run is, he's aging in real time. He's like 35 at the beginning of somewhere in the Jamie the Leno run, which was like the first run. He's like 35, and then you watch him grow into this like kind of crotchety old man. And then he dies. Or I guess he dies, and then he comes back to life, but he doesn't have like the demon blood in him anymore, so he looks like he's in his... He like properly looks like he's in his 70s. So yeah, I don't know. Marvel and DC don't do that, but they definitely have the thing where characters age. It's the milestone thing. Like characters hit milestones. That's how they age. Like Dick Grayson from 1940 up through the early 70s. Actually, no. 1940 up through the early 60s he's just boy. He is a boy. But from the mid 60s up through the late 60s, he is a teenager. From the 70s up through the 80s, he is a young man. From the 80s? I'll say like the 90s, because the 90s is when you get the Chuck Dixon run. I think the 90s is when like he goes from being a young man to just being a man. And then when he goes from the 90s up until he becomes Batman, that's when he becomes like, okay, you are the new patriarch. You've hit this new milestone. Dick Grayson hits milestones. Peter Parker hit milestones, as we were talking about earlier. That's how comic book characters in superhero comics progress. They don't have like numbered ages, but they hit those milestones that give you the vague notion of, okay, you're like in your 20s, you're like in your 30s, you're in your 40s. Like Bruce Wayne right now, there is no canonical age for Bruce Wayne, but he's in his 50s. He's nebulously in his 50s. So I don't know. That's how characters kind of progression in superhero comics. 1610 says, he just goes on to no, damn it. What's up, Marcus? How you doing, man? God damn it. I scrolled and now I lost everything. There we go. 1610 says, even when things do change, it's rare that they stay that way, either snapping back to normal after a few months or getting fully reset with a continuity reboot down the line. Yeah, and that's the whole status quo thing. I think that starts with Jim Shooter in like the late 80s, and then comics have just kind of suffered for that ever since. They put themselves in a catch-22 situation where things can either change around and characters can get killed off and whatnot, but killing popular characters obviously makes fans unhappy. Well, I think it only makes fans unhappy if you do it in an unsatisfactory way. I would totally have been fine with Bruce Wayne not coming back from the dead after Final Crisis. I think there's this might be heresy, but I feel like there could have been a way to bring, instead of having Superman come back from the dead after the death of Superman, wouldn't it have been interesting if like a pocket universe version of Superman who's like Silver Age Superman or Golden Age Superman showed up and filled the place of the deceased Superman? I think that would have been interesting. But I don't know. I guess we can't have popular characters stay dead. So Marvel and DC mostly pursue their current strategy of keeping things the way they are. Yep. And it's it is what it is. You're gonna talk about AI because I'm sorry. I mean, it's a scary topic. It just kind of is what it is. John Ty says, the problem with these companies is that their tentpole characters have to stay as evergreen so the new writers can write the character. Yeah, but I feel like that's where you have characters kind of start running in circles. I mean, it works for some characters. I don't know. There's a whole thing in there. I was gonna make this a video, but I'm probably just gonna say this here, and this is like tangentially related, but I had this thought the other day, and again, this like tangentially kind of relates to what you're talking about with characters progressing and whatnot, but I had this thought the other day that one of the big problems with DC Comics and DC Comics characters, especially on film, you see this with the DCEU really hard, but you see this in the comics and a lot of the TV shows as well. One of the big problems with DC is they feel this urge to be relevant, when I think that is Marvel's thing. Marvel's thing is being relevant. That's like the whole impetus behind the Marvel universe. This is the world outside your window, so therefore we're going to comment on the now. We're going to tell stories set in the now. It is the forever now. That is the Marvel way. That is the Marvel method. That is what the Marvel Universe was built on. And that has its own fair share of like drawbacks, but that's what Marvel is, you know. Marvel is forever relevant because it is forever now. That is not the case with DC Comics. DC Comics is, for lack of a better term, an orgy of fairy tales. That is what DC is. These stories, I think, shouldn't be relevant, or at least not in the way that like Marvel is relevant, where they're looking at like what's going on in politics right now, who's the big celebrity right now, what's going on in internet culture and discourse right now. That's Marvel's game. That's not DC's game. DC's game is being like a grand epic myth. It's a tapestry. It's a fairy tale, you know. And I feel like DC, from like the 80s onward, has, I mean, I don't want to get graphic here, but like the best way I can illustrate this point is DC is just, imagine the Marvel method of storytelling as like a lotion bottle, and DC has like a 12-inch mega penis. DC is trying to fit that massive thing inside that tiny little lotion bottle hole, and they're like they're using a knife to cut they're trying to cut their penis, and they're trying to cut the lotion bottle so the penis can fit, and they're just destroying everything to try and make a thing fit in another thing where it just won't fit. And the thing that's not fitting is DC characters being put in like relevant stories where like it's the now. That's not what DC is. DC is it's epic mythology, and part of that epic mythology is a sense of the world having like an evergreen sort of landscape, but I don't think evergreen has to equate to stagnant necessarily. I think characters should progress in that framework. That's how you build legacy, that's how you build history, that's how you build a foundation for stories to have like something we built off of in the future. That's how you get Wally West taking up the mantle of the Flash after Barry Allen dies, sacrificing himself in Crisis on Infinite Earths. It's how you have Lois and Clark raising a family after DC finally lets Clark tell Lois that he's Superman, and then from there's the marriage, and then after the marriage there's Clark and Lois discussing the possibility of having children, and then there's the litany of children that DC gives Superman, which like half of them they've just forgotten at this point, but that's where you get the new super family. Like the DC universe, like characters should progress, but I feel like there should be there should be an element of things should just feel evergreen. I feel like things should just kind of feel safe for anyone to like come in and do their thing. And I feel like adding characters or adding to the lore doesn't take away from that, or it shouldn't take away from that. problem is these companies want their temple characters to stay. Oh wait, where's the other one that I saw? Okay, there we go. Tebby says, question: how would you undo the horrible mistake with my boy Jonathan Kent? Honestly, DC's in a weird position given the backups to Action Comics, where I think you can say that you can make a case for there being two John Kents. I honestly think you can have John like a time displaced John Kent and like current 19-year-old John Kent. I think you can definitely do that. Will they do that? I don't know. I doubt it, but that's the direction they could definitely go in. And give me 1 second, guys. Hey, there we go. All right, what's up? Sorry, I have to take a call. It's like an important call. I forgot where I was, so I'm just gonna jump right here. There's this question: why do you think the X-Men are allowed to grow up and move forward while Spider-Man keeps failing badly? Well, the main reason is because the X-Men are built on, I think, like the the iconic era of the X-Men that a lot of people grew up on was Claremont, and Claremont's whole thing was never having, uh, never ending where you start. Um, you look at the beginning of Claremont's run, and you look at the end of Claremont's run, the it's night and day, completely different. Um, and a lot of X Men fans grew up with that style of storytelling, so they just kind of keep that going for the X Men. Um, that's why the X Men never look the same, like decade to decade. Um, Supreme says a lot of 70s and 80s Bronze Age creators like Roy Thomas, Marv Wolfman, Chris Claremont, Jim Starlin were also fans too, if they didn't fall into the trap of recreating their nostalgia. Um, I also think there's something to do with just this idea of the way in which we were telling stories back then. I think it was understood that these stories, no, not stories, these characters, much rather, are. You're supposed to use characters to illustrate ideas and concepts. Um, the characters themselves, are not. I don't know. Also, I'm trying to think of the best way I can put this. Um, I think that whole generation of creators were, they understood what these characters were built for, whereas I don't think the generations afterwards did. Um, the like the Starlins and the Claremonts and the Wolfmans and the Roy Thomases. Those were guys in also the Jim Shooters, because Jim Shooter also has a pretty legendary run on Legion of Superheroes, but those guys were from an era where like they still understood that in order to tell compelling stories, you have to use these characters to express ideas. The ideas themselves can't just be, well, the continuity back when I was 7 was good. Um, that can only take you so far. But you also had elder statesmen in comics to sort of guide them through that. I think by the time you get to like, the Bendis and the Jeff Johns generation, and the Dan DiDio generation and the Joe Quesada generation, I think by the time you get to those guys, those elder statesmen are sort of like, if they're not gone, they're like more hands off, or they're dead. So that generation just didn't really have I don't think they had like a firm sort of grasp on how to tell stories with those characters, largely, and that's only degenerated over the years, I feel. Ultimate Invasion ending with a mess. I mean, that's fair. I liked it. 1610 says Hickman's Ultimate Universe equals a new universe. 6160 female Miles Morales as Spider-Man. I mean that could. I trust Hickman. I trust Hickman to do it. Jeremy Adams' Flash run was fantastic. I liked it a lot. It was just very safe, but again, that was the thing that you needed a safe run after everything that we'd gotten with that character in comics. Arcus says, Beanie, the thing is, people stop growing after 30 and they just get old, so there's no way to naturally develop Peter Parker's Spider-Man. He's the only option. His only option is to retire, and nobody wants that. Oh man, that's so funny. It's hilarious because, like, the most popular critically Spider-Man film that we have is Into the Spider-Verse, and that features a post-Straczynski era style Peter Parker, and everyone loves him. And it's just because that's just what Peter Parker should be in comics now. He should be Peter B. Parker from Into the Spider-Verse, but I don't know, man. I don't know. It's like you just stop growing after you're 30. Not true. I know a lot of dudes who are in their 40s and 50s who are still growing, even if some of them are married and they're still just growing. And they are characters. They are characters worthy of stories being told about them. I'll say that. I'll definitely say that. Let's see. Did Earth 616 end with Secret Wars? The 2015 version, because they call the universe Prime Earth now after it was rebuilt after Secret Wars. I think it's gone back to being 616. I don't know though. John Ty says, you still like the characters? Oh, he's talking to Tevia. Tevia says, question, do you believe Hickman will succeed with Ultimate Spider-Man comics? And destroy Amazing Spider-Man in sales? Well, I don't know. We don't know any of the sales anymore. All the sales figures I kind of bunk right now. I can only tell you what's selling at my comic book store and the comic book stores that I go to. I can ask the people who work at them what's going on, but Comic-Con was already like kind of iffy at best. But now, given like all the multiple publishers and the way in which they kind of catalog their sales figures and are like not transparent completely, I don't trust I don't trust the numbers that we're getting now. I just don't. So all I can do is just ask comic shop owners what's selling. But that said, I do think Hickman could destroy the Amazing Spider-Man book, especially like if it's really good. I mean, that's the thing with Jonathan Hickman. Even when he's not good, he's still leagues above a lot of what's coming out on the shelves today, that day. So we'll see. I also think there's an element of people are just so fucking sick and tired of Amazing Spider-Man, they might just jump off and go read Ultimate Spider-Man. That's what a lot of people did in the early 2000s. It just so happened that Ultimate Spider-Man was also kind of rivaling Straczynski Spider-Man, which started off really strong until you got to Sense Pass and all that, and that's when things started to fall apart. But yeah, I don't know. We will see. We will definitely see. Hickman's What If Alternate Universe equals his run, his X-Men run all over again. It was kind of funny in a way. I was talking to my buddy Jack Genocide about this morning. Ultimate Invasion 4 to him felt like Hickman commenting on what happened with his run of the X-Men, Like, Hickman himself is the maker. He's trying to build this perfect world, but then the future inevitably comes and destroys it. And that's kind of like that's how Jack Genocide views Ultimate Invasion. It's like an allegory for Hickman working on trying to perfect the X-Men brand, and then after that, everyone just kind of comes on board and like tears it apart. I don't know. That could be what he's commenting on. I don't know, but that was an interesting read. I'll have to do a video on that with Jack Genocide, because he really liked Ultimate Invasion. I think he liked it more than I did. I kind of enjoyed it. I think I'm enjoying what I'm reading into it more so than I'm enjoying the actual piece itself, but it's something that definitely warrants conversation or in discussion. What happens if the new Ultimate Marvel Universe outsells the mainstream Marvel Universe? Will Marvel Comics retire that universe? I mean, they didn't last time. 1610 says, Marvel realized the success of Marvel Comics was not just a fad. Characters he co-created might survive as long as Batman and Superman, Stan Lee, and other Marvel figures determine the illusion of change. Interesting. Okay. Well, that's the way of putting it. Okay. Bruce is in his 80s because comic book time. They started the illusion of change in the 70s. Yeah. There's a quote that Stan Lee says. This might just be bunk, but Stan Lee says that, or there's like an old Playboy article. For every 7 years that passes in our time, 1 year passes in the Marvel Universe, which doesn't exactly make sense, because Peter Parker is very clearly aging in real time in like the 60s, and then he just kind of stops, and then he's in college from like 1968 through like 1977. So that doesn't quite track with the whole 7 years thing. I don't know. I think Stanley was just throwing out arbitrary numbers, but I don't know. You're right about the whole like illusion of change thing. On the Death of Superman arc, they could have actually used Superboy Prime as their replacement of Superman before he turned evil in the 2000s. They could have. Except the Marvel way doesn't make sense these days. I think it can. It just generally doesn't. Question: if DC Comics rebooted their universe again, how would you rebuild the DC universe from scratch? Oh, from scratch? Okay, well, first of all, it would be from the ground up. I wouldn't do this whole thing where, some stuff counts, some stuff doesn't, blah, blah, blah. No, we would just start from, okay, this is the beginning of Superman, this is the beginning of Wonder Woman, this is the beginning of Batman, this is the beginning of the Justice League. All the old JSA characters, they are comic book characters. And there is no Teen Titans, there is none of that. It's just like the Generation 2 heroes, I guess you'd call them. They are the prime heroes of the DC universe, and you are watching their stories and their universes unfold. in a completely new and different setting. That's what I would do with the DC universe, and then you see everything kind of like sprout from there. Total reboot. Total reboot is what I would do. John Ty says, what did you read today? Oh, so today, well, this isn't necessarily what I read, but this is what I bought. I got Flash #1. I did read this. I really enjoy this. It's really good. I bought Superman Lost issue 6. I haven't read it yet, but I got it finally. I picked up Immortal Thor by Al Ewing and Martin Coccolo. I haven't had a chance to read this thoroughly yet. I skimmed through it on the train, but I was getting close to my stop by the time I, really started trying to focus on it. Also, this cover is really good by Alex Ross. This is an amazing cover. I missed out on the opportunity to collect the Immortal Thor or the Immortal Hulk, but I'm not going to miss out on this one, so I'm going to collect the series. I'm excited for it. I picked up Doom Patrol issue #6. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I'm going to do that at work tomorrow, or on my way to work tomorrow. And then I picked up Green Arrow issue #4, and I got the cardstock variant for obvious reasons. Big obvious reasons. Oh, and speaking of insanity and Coom, I guess, I got Venom. This is volume 3 of the Al Ewing and Ram V run with Brian Hitch on the art. So I'm getting caught up on this book. This has been really interesting so far. I talked about the Venom run in my last video that I did, where I'm talking about the fact that the comic industry is just kind of getting better now. Like, superhero comics are getting better. In fact, I think they're the best they've been in a long time. There was that huge stretch from like the late 2000s up through like the early 2020s where comics were just kind of crap. But I think we're in a space now where they're really good again. And this is one of the books that I cited, so I'm super excited to get back into this. I know this is where they kind of do some of the Madeline Pryor stuff, where she's like the Goblin Queen. So I'm fascinated to see where this goes, and I already have volume 4 on order, so I'm gonna breeze through this bitch, and then I'm gonna read volume 4, because this run reads really well so far. And I also was reading Decorum most of the day, which is in my backpack downstairs. I'm not gonna go through all that, but like, yeah, Decorum by Jonathan Hickman and Mike Huddleston, I think the artist is named. Let me see. Yeah, Mike Huddleston. That book is really good. I missed out on picking it up in the individual issues, but I'm glad I got that massive, like, it's like a hardcover. It reads really well. It reads how I think people who haven't read Dune think Dune reads. Like, it's just nothing but charts and graphs and, like, exposition. I mean, there's a lot of exposition and stuff in Dune, but, like, I don't know, Hickman has a very specific writing style. One of my friends who is on the spectrum, just pointed it out so he doesn't get canceled, but he's on the spectrum, and he read, I handed them the, my copy of Decorum, and they were like, this is the most autistic shit. Who's this guy? Hickman? Jonathan Hickman's king of the autists, because this is autistic as shit. So I guess that's a ringing endorsement for my buddy, but Yeah. That's what I read today. I read all these, and I bought all these, and hopefully I can finish reading these tomorrow. Um, Arcus says DC's game is to make money, and being relevant gets you notice. Whole clickbait stuff. Otherwise, they would remain niche, and it doesn't make money for long. That's true, but also I feel like a lot of DC's big popular stuff isn't relevant, or at the very least, not relevant in the clickbaity kind of world outside your window sense. A lot of the relevant DC stories, or I think DC is most relevant when they're being kind of evergreen and hitting on topics that are relevant to any era. Like you look at something like Justice by Jim Kruger and Alex Ross. That's not a story that is defined by any particular day or time. It's a big epic where the supervillains have a collective nightmare where they all watch the heroes die trying to save the world from nuclear holocaust. So all the so all the villains get together and they make a deal with Brainiac to have these like hub worlds, and that's gonna be their thing. They're gonna save like half of humanity, and they're gonna make a deal with the devil, essentially, like space Satan, to sacrifice half the human population to save the other half. Like, that's a big epic kind of story, I feel. And that's relevant in the sense that like it's an immortal kind of tale. It's something that you'd see in like, you know, ancient mythology. It's something that you'd see in like, you know, you can see that in like a pulp sci-fi film. You can see that in like a modern like horror film, because it just works in any era. You can tell that kind of story at any time in any setting. I think that's where DC shines. It's the best. Dark Knight Returns. You know, that's the story of the old guy who was a hip and cool young guy, got old, and is now putting on his old clothes and going like, all right, I can still whip these whippersnappers into shape. The world's changed, but I haven't. I'm old, but I can do what I want. Like, it's Unforgiven. That's fuck. As soon as I start to list off examples, they just fall out of my brain. But you know, it's a tried and true story. You know, the coming out of retirement to get the job done. You know, there are a lot of stories like that. That's John Wick. There's a whole John Wick franchise built around that. You know, just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. Like that's what that is. So I feel like DC's big thing is it's the fairy tale. It's the epic. It's telling relevant stories that are relevant in that they're reflections of immortal problems, or problems that we faced in the year 2022 that we also faced in like 1972, that we also faced in 1922, that we also faced in 1832. Like these are immortal ideas, immortal problems. That's the relevancy of DC, I think. No, damn it. On Judd Winick, do you feel like he can also be preachy and heavy-handed? Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's his style, and I like it generally. But like, yeah, he could be very heavy-handed. On the original Ultimate Universe, that was supposed to replace the Marvel Universe in the 2000s. It was. In fact, that's what Bill Jemas wanted to do, and then everyone told him that he was insane and not to do that. So we just kind of ended up with like two Marvel universes running concurrently, and like the main 616 universe just kind of started adapting the style, like the trashy MTV commentary style of the Ultimate Universe. So then you kind of just had two Marvel universes that just kind of felt like reflections of one another, and then they just sort of, and then you got Secret Wars. And now we're in the boat that we're in now. Oh, good night, Tevya. Christopher Kent versus John Kent versus gay John Kent versus New 52 John Lane Kent. John Lane Kent, what? Hold up, what? Oh, wait, what? Oh, that was the New 52 Superboy? Interesting. Oh, that's weird. I did not read the Superboy run long enough then. Interesting. Well, that's another Super Son that Clark and Lois have just out in the world, I suppose. Although it looks like he died. Hold on a second. I think it said. I think it just said. I think this said that he died at some point. Appearance of Death. Superboy. Volume 6, issue 34. Okay, so yeah, he died. He did. He done dead. Arcus says, Beanie, there's a difference between Peter B. Parker and old man side character and ongoing. Oh yeah, there's a difference between Peter B. Parker and old man side character and ongoing Peter Parker Spider-Man. You can't prolong older characters without feeling contrived. I don't think it's contrived to have characters age and like hit milestones that feel natural. Like the place Peter Parker's in right now does not feel natural. It feels regressive and worse. On top of feeling regressive, it also feels like static. Like it feels like we're just kind of in standing water. It doesn't like I feel like comics should feel like or Marvel comics in particular. I feel should have a sense of kinetic energy to them. It should feel like you're in a river that's going downstream, like really fast, or not really fast, but like you're just on the rocks and you're just kind of pass it along the stream. And you're going to a river, and then that river has a whirlpool that kind of ties into a waterfall that goes into more running water. That's how Marvel Comics should feel. It should feel like running water. Right now, I feel like, especially with Peter Parker, he's just kind of stuck in this like swampy standing water, just like full of mosquitoes and gross biomes and film and filth. That's just where Peter Parker is right now. I feel like I don't know. I feel like the Peter B. Parker take on the character is everything that post One More Day Peter Parker should have been, but wasn't. I'd totally be fascinated to see a post like a divorcee Peter Parker after the death of Aunt May, just trying to pick the pieces of his life back up once again after everything fell apart again. I don't know, that happens to people, you know, like having to watch someone like start their life over when they're like in their 40s. That's potentially very interesting. And it happens a lot. Super Omega says, on The Flash, there are fans who view Wally as the old guy and Barry as the main character, the main current guy. Also, those fans got through DC with the New 52 and the DC show. Do you find that weird? I do, but time is a way of normalizing things. It's kind of like how there's a whole generation of DC fans who just kind of see the Red Hood as the angry Robin who reluctantly hangs out with the Bat family but still hangs out with the Bat family. Those fans are weird, but there's a whole generation of kids that grew up with that status quo. And I think it's weird that, I mean, I'm still in the camp who thinks that Jason Todd should have come back from the dead in the first place, but he's here now. He's here now, and he's been Red Hood longer than he was ever dead. Jason Todd has been Red Hood longer than he was ever dead. Let that tickle your brain for a second. So again, time has a way of normalizing things. So it just kind of is what it is. I mean, all things considered, there are people who probably feel the same way, or felt the same way when I was growing up, about Peter Parker being married. Like, I'm sure there were people who were like in their 40s or like in their 50s who were like, man, there's a whole generation of kids that grew up with Peter Parker as a married man in his 20s. That's bizarre. You know, just kind of is what it is there. So no, it's weird for me personally, but like when I stop and think about it, it's not all that weird. 6 and 10 says, the problem with longtime fans is that they hate reboots for new fans. That's, yeah. I also think the problem with reboots inherently is that it comes from a negative place. Because it's a negative place, but it's also like a misinformed place. I don't actually think people... Are there people who are discouraged from reading comics because the numbers are big and the continuity is scary? Yeah. But people who want to read comics are going to read comics. You know? It's kind of like the whole One Piece thing. One Piece has had like 1,000+ chapters. It still gets new readers every day. I remember when I worked at a comic book store, people were always coming in trying to start One Piece. People were always trying to come in and trying to start Naruto. That's on a whole sequel series right now. Boruto is like 40 volumes deep right now? And people want to start Naruto and read the whole thing? Like, if people want to read comics, they're going to read comics. It doesn't matter if the numbers are big or not. I think that's the real frustration that a lot of people have with, like, the notion of reboots. The thing that people kind of like about these stories is that you have a start place and then it goes somewhere. And then there's, like, history and legacy and continuity. I think that's the thing that people like about comics. You're watching these characters grow, and through that growth there's new developments, and those new developments are the foundations of other new developments. I don't know, just the whole thing in that I think rebooting kind of misses the point of that. But it just is what it is. Um, I say that as I cope and seethe. Uh, on the whole, everything is canon ethos at DC. I feel it's a total cop out. If everything is canon, question: was Bloodhaven nuked or not? That's the weird thing with it. I think in a way, it's kind of like Hyper Time. I think there is this whole sort of I think people remember Bloodhaven being nuked, but as like a weird collective dream that didn't happen. Maybe, I think, I don't know. That's like the best way I can put it. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. Or like how Barry and the Flash family would remember the fact that his parents were like alive and watched him grow into the Flash, and they were at his second marriage, or like they were at his like second wedding. Like I think they remember Beverly Lewis, but like not really. She's like a vague memory. Or like how I think Elongated Man is still around. I think he remembers that his wife was murdered, but like not really, because she's alive now, I suppose. I don't know. It's weird. DC's in a weird spot. I don't know. Don't ask. It's weird, but I kind of see what they're doing. But it's also just like you said. It's a weird kind of cop out. Oh, they referenced it in City Boy? That's weird. You're making me want to check out City Boy, that comic that I'm not all that interested in reading, but I'll read it for that. Beanie, okay. What's up, Arcus? You forget the part where all your examples are the short stories or limited runs, and that we're talking about ongoings, and the Dark Knight Returns isn't week to week story. Is it a week to week story? Yeah, but in DC's case, nobody really cares about the week to week stories. All the major DC stories are like the crazy out of continuity stuff. That's DC's bread and butter. That's part of the big reason why I feel like DC could just do away with the ongoing format. I think DC could just forego continuity and just tell miniseries stories. I honestly feel that way. I feel like DC could just do that. They could have one final big event that is the last hurrah, and then after that, there's just nothing but like out of continuity, like prestige, like miniseries and stuff like that. I feel like that's the direction DC Comics should go in, but I don't know. That's just me. 616 kept adapting Ultimate stuff, and that's really what ended up killing that universe, because then it had to be completely different with world-altering events like Ultimatum and Cataclysm, which is funny because I feel like post-Ultimatum, the Ultimate Universe got really interesting. Like Ultimatum is like a terrible event. Ultimate's 3 and then Ultimatum, terrible. But everything after that, really interesting. And in a weird way, feels like the most authentic version of Marvel Comics. More authentic than what Marvel Comics were at the time in the main 616 universe. Because the status quo was just kind of bottomed out. So you're in uncharted territory. You can do whatever you want. You want Thor to be the president of the United States of America? Cool. You want to have a U.S. Civil War II, where like you have people seceding, and like I think Texas is, like secedes from the United States. I think California secedes. mutants are all on the run and being rounded up in concentration camps, but then they're also given this like really crappy land in like Utah, where like the X-Men have to fight the Nimrods, is like the Sentinel Wave 2.0. I don't know, man. I think all of that stuff was really interesting. The death of Peter Parker was interesting. Like the whole thing where Nick Fury instigates a war between the Ultimates and the Avengers. Like all that stuff was really fascinating, man. I don't know. I feel like that's when Marvel just kind of felt the most like classic Marvel comics in a way. Or I guess Ultimate Marvel felt like the most like classic Marvel comics in that way, where anything could have happened. Anything could have happened. Nobody was safe. I thought that was very interesting. But then they nuked the universe, so nothing mattered. Supreme Omega says, on the New 52 fans, they view Babs as the one true Batgirl and see Oracle as a mistake. They also view Damian and Red Hood as the Robins that matter, and view Tim Drake as the boring has-been middle child. Yeah, super weird. But, again, time normalizes things, and that's weird in and of itself. Arcus says, Peter Parker starts it over in his 70s for the 5th time. Batman becomes more trustful again in 150 and dies. Oh, and Superman dies and comes back the 18th time. That's how it plays out in comics. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to. You can let some of these characters go. I think that's also an option. But, you know, it is what it is. 1610man says, new fans want to get into comics equals it's the internet age, wikis and pirating comics. Yeah. In fact, I feel like piracy has made comics like a million times more accessible. So the whole rebooting thing, just, you don't have to do it. You really don't. Supreme says, it's weird for me with the New 52 fans because I grew up reading the 90s and early 2000s DC where Jason was divisive dead Robin and Tim was the more popular current Robin, Babs was Oracle, and Barry was the old dead man. I mean, I'm in that same boat, but we're also just old men at this point yelling at the clouds. Wasn't it great when Barry Allen was dead? Weren't things better when Kyle Rayner was the Green Lantern and the Green Lantern Corps was gone? We're old. We're old. It is what it is. We're in a new landscape. It's weird, but I think things can still kind of work out. Multiverse equals do what the fuck you want. Yeah, which is kind of what that's turned into, which is a shame because I feel like multiverse stories can legitimately be very interesting. But we, instead of doing interesting things with the multiverse, we just kind of do like really silly, stupid things that just kind of feel lacking in imagination. I feel that way. For me, mainstream Marvel peaked at Dark Reign. I love that era. I feel like I think I've said this before. I think the Marvel Universe ends in the 90s. Like everything after like the Infinity Trilogy, after the Clone Saga, after Age of Apocalypse, that whole like mid-90s period, that is the end of the Marvel Universe, and then you get Earth X. You just stop reading at that point, and then just you read Earth X. This is the Marvel Universe 20 years afterwards, and that's Marvel. That's the end of the Marvel Universe, and then they keep making Earth X books, and you don't have to read those. Comics got boring for me in the mid 2010s. The culture war nonsense. Yeah, the culture war thing was really stupid. But I feel like just in general, the culture war, especially in America, it was hinged on reactionary thinking and not critical thinking, which is the ultimate problem that I think is. I think that's the problem that the future faces. Reactionary thinking in the face of in the face of situations where you should be critically thinking. Longtime fans, I want my fan service back. Welcome to the multiverse. Yeah. That's all the multiverse movies are. And it works, I guess, unless you're DC. But for Marvel, it works, I guess. People love seeing Spider-Man just kind of stand around in the background and not say anything and do anything, but he's there. Okay. Arcus says Bruce Wayne, Peter Parker, ones you sell the best. That's why companies will never let them go. I mean, I hear you, and I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying, I think that is the idea behind them is these characters are too profitable to let them go, but I mean, there's a point in time where Ultimate Spider-Man is outselling, like the Miles Morales book was outselling Amazing Spider-Man. I'd have to ask my old boss, but I'm pretty sure there was a time where Ultimate Spider-Man was outselling the main Amazing book. I think there's a time where I think the Batman and Robin Reborn book was selling really, really well. I think it spiked that book's numbers real hard. I mean, again, this is all like stuff I have to like research and then like ask around, but I think people do like the idea of characters being put to rest with graceful endings and then seeing the next generation take charge. It's that first part that never, I don't think Marvel and DC quite get right 100% of the time. In order to get new characters and new legacies, you have to phase out the old characters gracefully. It's just they never quite do that last part. That's why a lot of the new characters they're not getting put over properly, just because people have a grudge against them because their favorite character got shat on. Now I sympathize a bit with Wade, Busiek, Johns, and DiDio. I like how they view the pre-crisis as the one true DC. I view post-crisis DC as my DCU. God, I feel old. I mean, you're gonna feel that way as you get older and you still read comics. Like, that's just kind of how it's gonna be. But I think in the face of looking at what is versus what you liked growing up, you do run into the problem of, if you ever do take that jump into comics and you get the chance to work at DC or Marvel, but in this case DC because we're talking about DC, you could run the risk of doing what I think a lot of those guys do, which is they play the greatest hits game, but they just bring stuff that they liked back and not actually tell new and interesting stories with these characters and universes because they're so fixated on trying to fix what's broken. I see how they get there. It's just, I think it's problematic, to say the least. If anybody's watching Fiona and Cake, they use the multiverse really well. I haven't seen Fiona and Cake, but my girlfriend is, and she said that it's really good. Earth X takes place in 1999, the end of the 20th century. You're right, it is 1999. So, I guess in universe, Marvel ends in like 1980 or something like that. Interesting. It's crazy that Comicsgate started because female staff members went out for milkshakes, and fans are typing angry comments on. I think Comicsgate started a little before that. I think in the same way that Gamergate started off as like a very nuanced problem that quickly kind of it devolved into women doing women things, men hate women do women things, blah blah blah. These angry incels hate women. I think so. Gamergate is fascinating because that starts off as gamers being frustrated with the lack of credibility of games journalism, or the lack of integrity in the field of gaming's journalism. And then Anita Sarkeesian kind of like running her shtick of video games are sexist and no one taking her seriously, but then Zoe Quinn coming onto the field and kind of parodically proving all of the points that gamers were making about the games industry and journalism right, where she was a developer who was sleeping with certain journalists to garner favorable reviews. And then Anita Sarkeesian kind of jumped on to her defense, going like, "See, gamers just hate women." And then that just kind of devolves into like the back and forth between the two internet factions of like the incels and the white knights. And that just kind of, it's just so funny that Gamergate has that legacy now of like angry gamer nerds hating women. The poor woman in gaming, when that's not how that problem started. Comicsgate is it's a very similar situation. Comicsgate starts with a lot of disgruntled comic book fans who are not liking the directions that comics were going in from the late 2000s up through the early 2010s. This is when you get this is when the event fatigue from Marvel is setting in. This is when DC does the New 52. This is when you get that all new, all different Marvel era. Or I guess it starts with the Marvel Now era and then into the all new, all different Marvel era. This is when DCU starts up. So comic book fans are just kind of frustrated at that point in time where they're like, ugh, Marvel and DC are kind of falling by the wayside. All the indie books are very distinctly feeling like Netflix pitches, because that's the big thing at the time. The comic book industry is starting to, well, not now, but like at the time was starting to follow the novel industry method of, okay, this is a good read, but what we're really looking for is the movie deal that we can get out of this. And comics fans just kind of feeling disenfranchised with the medium after that. And then from there, and I don't remember how this starts. It definitely starts before the whole milkshake incident, though. But I think DC's the one that throws the first punch here, because this is when we're in the New 52, and then Wally West is introduced, and the New 52 Wally West is black, and then you have a lot of people going like, all right, well, this kid is not Wally West. Wally West is not he's not like the ghetto statistic stereotype kid. You're just changing things for the sake of changing things. And DC's response was, well, you just hate him because you're racist. That was like the first big punch in that whole, well, comics fans are just racist. And then things just kind of devolve from there. You start seeing more race swaps. You start seeing more gender bends. Then Marvel does that whole thing where they gender bend their entire, they gender bend and they race swap their entire line of characters, or like a solid like 50 to 60% of their line of characters. And then on top of the already frustrated comics crowd who just was not liking what was coming out before then, this is kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, and they're like, this all sucks. And then Marvel at this time, following in DC's footsteps, shoots back by saying, well, you just don't like it because you're racist and you're sexist and you hate women. That becomes like the big not dog whistle, but that's the big defense, you know, because it's one of those defenses where like you can say it and then people kind of recoil and go like, oh no, I'm not, nah. And then the obvious thing is like, well, see, if you don't like it, well, then you're actually sexist or racist, and if you don't have a problem with it, well, then you're not racist. Blah, blah, blah. But I think that's when like the whole like Comicsgate thing starts up. From that discourse is, if you don't like what's coming out right now, well, then make your own comics. So then a lot of those guys did start making their own comics, and they're largely pretty terrible. But like, they did. You know, Eric July's making his ISOM book. You know, Ethan Esciver's doing Cyberfrog at a snail's pace. You get Jawbreakers. I will say that they are comics. But that's where the whole, that's how Comicsgate started. It starts in a very similar place to Gamergate. There is a legitimate problem here. The industry is not addressing it. The industry response is, well, you're just racist and or sexist, and you hate women, and you hate like gay people and trans people. Not at all the actual problem, but that's the excuse to just kind of get the to seem more favorable. That's the corporate response to seem more favorable. And then things just kind of devolve from there. And that's how Comicsgate started, and things have been broken ever since. 1610 Man also goes on to say the multiverse in comics should be used to tell fan service stories for longtime fans to get that beginning, middle, and end. It's sort of like the MC2 and stuff like that. Yeah, I can agree. 1610 says, post-crisis, New Earth still exists in the DC multiverse, but Rebirth only picked and chose the greatest hits instead of going back to that universe like they promised. Yep. Supreme Omega says, for Batman, it's weird for me, for Bruce being forgiving with Damian and Red Hood, because in the 2000s he was extremely harsh on Tim, Steph, and Cass. Like, really, yeah, he was. But we're also in that time period now where we're in a post Grant Morrison era, and the whole point of Morrison's run on Batman was to say that the Bruce Wayne, like the way Bruce was treating the Bat family in the 90s and 2000s was wrong. Bruce Wayne was out of pocket for that. Like he should have been acting like that, but he was stressed, and this is just kind of what happens when you have all this tragedy just kind of compounding on itself and building on itself. This man's obviously not going to act like a man anymore. He's going to act like a psycho. Because he's just kind of a feral animal further being backed into a corner. So, like, Bruce is a little soft on Damien and Jason right now, but he's also just a softer person now, post-Morrison. Super Omega says, for all the problems with the 2000s comics, at least it was the last decade where comics were allowed to be comics. Because in the 2010s, both the New 52 and Marvel now is everything IP farming. I mean, it is. That was a big problem in that 2010s decade. And I think we're kind of getting out of it now. I slowly but surely, I think we're getting out of it. 1610 Men says Zoe Quinn, Lady of the Night, riding all the control rods. Oof. Yep. She definitely built her career. I'll say that. DC New 52 relaunched and Marvel Now relaunched Dawn of Culture Wars. It really was. It really was. Remember the Ultimate Comics Reborn launched in 2011 with Miles Morales? Also another, if you don't like it, you're just racist. Yep. Yep. Never mind the fact that Ultimate Spider-Man itself, just the book, even before Miles shows up, is kind of nosediving. I really feel like Ultimate Spider-Man has like a solid 111 issues, and then the book is just not. It is not anywhere near as good as it was for those first 111 issues. After that, it just kind of does this, like quality wise, just kind of does that. Retconning one more day for fan service card equals it was Norman Osborn all along. That would suck if they did that, but I could totally see them doing that. Yeah, I don't know. Be that as it may, and like all the stuff going on in comics, like behind the scenes right now in the industry, I think at large, a lot of books are really good right now. At least I'll say I'm reading a lot more superhero comics now than I was like 5 years ago. And I think that's a good sign. I legitimately think that's a good sign. Like you couldn't pay me to buy a Venom book like 5 years ago. Here I am. Well, actually, 5 years ago you got like that was the Space Knight era, right? I think so. Apparently that stuff's really good, but like I didn't care. But dude, I'm reading Venom right now and I love it. I'm reading Shazam right now. And I'm not typically a big Shazam guy, but I'm reading Shazam right now. Like, there's a lot of really good stuff going on in comics. So, I don't know. For all the problems I have with, like, the industry, I think at large, the industry's kind of healing right now. So, I don't know. I'm generally pretty optimistic about what's going on. Hey, man. Until next time, I'll keep doing videos. Yeah. I was gonna say something else, but my brain is fried. I'm tired. I'm gonna go to bed. Well, actually, before I go to bed, I have to like film a reel for YouTube. I'll do that in the morning. Yeah, I go to work later tomorrow, so I'll do it in the morning. But anyways, I will see you guys next week. I might try to start streaming a game for you guys. I don't know. We'll see. But until then, thanks for watching, guys, and read some comics, enjoy comics, and I will catch you in the next stream. Play X-Men Origins. I can't. I need to get an adapter for my PS3. Because OBS will not pick up. OBS just doesn't pick up my my PS3 on here, and I think I need to like. I don't trust any of the download links for the PC versions of X-Men Origins Wolverine. I just don't. But I don't know. We'll see. I'll try something. But until then, see you guys. Good night.